Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to the podcast today, Harvest Your Own. Love to welcome Josh Glover to the show. I like to describe him as a hunter, angler, husband, father, dog trainer, wild game enthusiast. If you follow his social media posts, you'll see all kinds of wonderful wild game dishes and food, and he shares a lot of inspiration. That's why he's on the show today. Welcome, and tell us a little bit in your own words about who Josh Glover is.
Hey, thanks, Brad, for having me. I said before, I've never done any of this before, so it's kind of neat. It's really cool to come out here and jump on the podcast with you and kind of share some knowledge. But yeah, I'll start with where I'm from. I'm a proud Newfoundlander and grew up till about 10 years ago, I guess, in Newfoundland, and various couple different places, rural and urban as well. But there's one thing that never really changed with me, and it was kind of the hunting and fishing side. I moved to Winnipeg for my career as a work with Transport Canada, marine safety. So we deal typically with the shipping industry in Canada. So in 2010, I moved there. Me and my wife moved there to Winnipeg, and that's really when my kind of the hunting side really took off. You know, I wanted to hunt deer. I wanted to hunt geese. The variety of things, we call it the mainland, where we come from. The variety of things we can hunt here on the mainland is absolutely phenomenal compared to the things we have in Newfoundland. You know, so, and then the other side of it is, well, what do you do with it once you got it?
Right.
So,
that's a big part of it.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting, coming from Newfoundland, you basically are born and raised in the outdoors, because Newfoundland is the great outdoors, right? You grow up fishing and hunting and doing things with your dad and your uncle and your mom. And, you know, when did you get started? Were you a wee one out on the rock when you got going, or how does that work out there?
Yeah, so a couple different things. It's whether we were, you know, hunting for sport or hunting for, it was always about food, of course, but some things it was sustenance. So
right.
We had to go and get these things like cod fishing. So we would go out every fall and get our winter's fish,
right.
Things like that. And then there's the other side with hunting and you know, moose hunting and bear hunting wasn't really on my radar back then, but just because my dad never did it and my uncles, some of them did, but the big one was small game.
Right.
That's where I got my start. That's the bread and butter of where my hunting career, I'll call it a career,
right.
Came from. You know, rabbits. We would snare rabbits right out my back porch. Right. We would come home. Me and my brother would come home from school for lunch, and we'd go up and check our snares.
Nice. That's a great way to live. You know, not enough people get out and enjoy the great outdoors like that. And being born and raised that way, it just explains why you have the social media posts that you do.
Absolutely, and you know, I have 2 little ones of my own now, and one's 6 and one's 4. And you know, they've seen more in the hunting world than I did until I was 10, 12, 15 years old.
Right. Yeah, I watched that pretty closely too, because you do obviously have a big influence on your kids, and obviously you come by it honestly because your family influenced you to get into it. From, can we call it back east, or how do you refer to it?
Sure, yeah, back east works.
You know, if we're mainlanders, you must come from the rock or
home. Is home. It don't matter where I live in Canada, Newfoundland is home.
There you go.
Yeah.
Home is where the heart is.
That's right. Yeah.
So is small game still the biggest part of your hunting interest?
I would say, yeah. I mean, I still hunt rabbits. I have a beagle,
Right.
So and I was hopefully we'll get you out again this year. But our hunt this spring didn't go as well as we wanted. But that's hunting. But yeah, small game is definitely my bread and butter.
Right. So in Newfoundland, did you hunt a lot of upland game birds too, or was it primarily rabbits?
Kind of like here with rough grouse and spruce grouse, we have those back home as well, and it was mostly opportunistic. So you're out rabbit hunting, you see a grouse, you do whatever, and sometimes you get one in your snare, or so it was always a nice little treat to get a grouse as well.
Right.
And then again, sometimes you go with the 22 and go and get some grouse and things like that. But definitely not the way I hunt them now.
Right.
Right. Now it's more targeted to a point where I went and got that little pointing dog. Right. So now I have a pointing dog to train. You mentioned earlier, a dog trainer. I'd use that term very loosely. But it's been a lot of fun. Sure.
Another member of the family and someone else to share the great outdoors with.
Absolutely.
And I can tell by your photos that your kids love the dogs immensely. Yeah.
Yeah, they're more house pets than they're hunting
working
dogs.
Tools.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
What about your wife? Did she come from a hunting family?
She did. Yeah. She comes from a different part of the island where they have more caribou.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So she grew up on caribou. Her dad always hunted moose and caribou and rabbits and stuff like that as well. So I grew up, we've been together for 17 years almost. So,
right.
We kind of grew up together, doing similar things. And it's kind of the catalyst for us was when we moved away to Winnipeg, we started doing so many more things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because you basically got into a relationship where someone was used to eating wild game. Where I got married and my wife, her experiences were she ate deer 2 or 3 times in her life and it was overcooked and they fed it to the dog when no one was looking. So is it any easier? You basically live on wild game. Is it well accepted by everyone in the family?
Yeah, I think so. My kids right now, they eat it as if it's normal.
Right.
Right. There's some things. I mean, there's different meats have different textures, have different tastes. Moose is king with us.
Right.
Deer, take it or leave it. Whitetail deer, I'll say, take it or leave it with us. I like it. I actually really enjoy deer, whitetail meat. My wife, not so much.
Right.
So there's things we like and there's things we don't like.
Yeah, and that goes with any wild game and any type of meat too. I can understand if you were raised on caribou and moose, why, deer might not appeal quite so much, but there are lots of ways to produce it or prepare it. I'm just going to share some information on where people can go about harvesting your own, whether you're getting started or you're a seasoned outdoors person. There's a comprehensive library of information to check out.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
Well, where's your next meal coming from, Josh?
I don't know. I just finished off a big bear ham, so maybe.
And that's the main reason I'm going to have you on the show today is, we're talking about things like rabbits and black bears, which really aren't that common amongst hunters. They're some of our species in Alberta that are really overlooked. And I think it's a huge oversight on some hunters' part, missing out on some bounty that is readily available, longer seasons, multiple seasons, and great eating. So back to your social media and your culinary dishes that you share on Instagram and Facebook. Your last one I think I saw was tempura goose tenders with some type of green sauce. What was that?
So I was digging through the freezer last week and I found a pack of goose tenders from 2015, I think. But they were vacuum sealed and I pulled them out and I went to town. I made a green curry sauce. We started actually really experimenting with green and red curries and stuff. My wife kind of transitioned into the curry side of things. So I thought it'd be a great idea to kind of mix the tempura with the green curry and throw in some basmati rice, and it actually turned out really nice.
I think it sounds fantastic. But the main reason I asked you about that is You obviously thought well ahead when you were processing your game that you removed all those tenders and put them in a separate package so that you could prepare a special meal.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, I do okay. So say if I'm looking at a goose, I'm thinking of the meals that we're going to have,
right.
What kind of things we can come up with, and how can we get the kids eating it more, or how can I get my wife eating it more? If I have company coming over, what's going to be more appealing to them, that kind of thing. So yeah, I break down the animals and package it the way that we're going to eat it.
Right. I do that for the most part too. On our ducks and geese, I remove the legs and thighs, and I honestly think that they're more tender and delicious than the breast meat a lot of the times, depending on how you prepare them. But I was intrigued by removing all the tenders. I normally leave them on, and then there's a couple, treats that we have fresh off the grill or out of the frying pan that the girls eat first or something. But with the limited geese, a load of tenders is a special meal for some tempura and green curry sauce. There's no doubt about that. Black bears. Let's go right back to black bears. Spring season, we were all stuck at home this year. It's interesting in Alberta. License sales were way up. There was more bear hunters this year than I think we've ever recorded, or at least in decades. Lots of people getting out, more archery licenses sold, and it's probably because people had more time. We also see a 30% increase in fishing license sales so far this year, and there's still almost 4 months left in the year. So people are getting back out there, but certainly nowhere near the number that we see for even waterfowl hunters or deer hunters. You mentioned growing up, your dad never hunted bears, your uncles did, but you never really did that back home. Something new that was more mainland based. See how I worked that in there, the mainland?
Yeah, no, that's pretty accurate. I mean, people did hunt bears. You knew a few guys that did, but there was always a stigma attached to it, and it's the same here. Dirty dump bears and things like that.
Right.
But the way I look at things is, they're not going in there eating garbage. Why would something go in there and eat something that's not edible? They're scavengers, right? Like a lot of the animals that we eat, they are scavengers, and they're quite edible themselves. It's just the stigma that's kind of attached to it.
Yeah, I prefer to describe them as an omnivore, something that will eat meat, but the primary part of their diet is berries, grasses, sedges, herbs, all the rest of it. And, it's funny how hunters, I think it's because we get spoiled. We come up with derogatory names and terms for things. Snow geese they come to mind automatically because people call them sky carp and all kinds of names that just sort of make me shudder a little bit because they're providing more opportunity for hunting than we've ever seen in my lifetime for waterfowl, yet they don't have respect. And black bears fall into that same category. They were a huge species for settlers in Alberta. People came out here, cleared parts of the boreal forest and the parkland, and black bears were a huge part of their annual planning for meals. You're one person that is an oddity nowadays because I know that the black bears that you had last year, you actually even rendered your own lard from them. Can you walk us through that process? How did you do it? Why did you do it?
It comes back to the kind of the use everything mentality.
Right.
You're taking the life of an animal, right? Yep. It's never easy. But once you're on the other end and you're butchering the animal, I feel like you need to use as much as possible. Now, I'm not going to judge you if you don't.
Right.
Right. I really, it really doesn't matter to me how you use the animal within the law. But for me, I want to use as much as possible. And the kicker of all of that is it is absolutely phenomenal, fat that comes from the animal. Depending on which animal it is, of course.
Right. But
for black bears, you can use it for so many different things. I use it from everything from cooking to, I waterproofed my boots last year with it. and I know I kind of touched on that, did that to see if it would actually work, and it was amazing. It worked.
It did, and the settlers did the same thing. They didn't have store-bought dubbin and mink oil and stuff to put on their boots, so bear grease was very important to them. And it's funny, I ran into a pastry chef from France, and we were talking about some of his favorite things to work with, and bear grease just lit up his eyes. Bear grease And the other thing was, when you clean a big old honker in the fall and they've been on grain for a long time, they got those big wads of fat in the abdomen. He said bear grease and goose grease make the best pastries going. So the settlers obviously knew a lot more about where their meals were coming from and the value of them. Lots of people that are into fitness nowadays buy protein bars and stuff. 100 grams of bear meat has 20 grams of protein. That's pretty impressive. That's the same as a protein bar that you're going to go buy a case of at Costco. So, you can make your own protein snacks and survive quite well and get a real good boost, whether you're trying to build muscle or sustain energy or whatever you're increasing your protein in your diet for.
And I don't know about you, Brad, but when I eat game meat, you feel different.
Right.
You absolutely don't. You don't get that laziness, that kind of loginess of when you eat a big fatty steak. You definitely feel different. You feel like you have more energy.
Right. And I think that all comes into play when you change your diet for any reason, make it healthier, leaner, have all the nutrition that you need. It's just a positive thing for you, your family, your body, all the rest of it. So black bears, we're back on the subject. Make your own lard. I think that's so awesome. I know some other people that do it, but not many. They cut it up into pieces. They put it on a cookie sheet in the oven. They bake it. Basically, what you're doing is rendering it down into a liquid fat, and then they run it through a sieve just to strain it, clean it, and you can put it in jars and store it just like you buy lard in Safeway, right? It comes on the shelf. It's not in the fridge. It's not in the cooler. It's got incredible shelf life, can last a long time. And whether you're going to fry some eggs up in the morning or make some pastry, or you have to waterproof your boots before you go rabbit hunting or setting snares, it gets put to use. The other thing I know that you're very good at is making your own bear hams. How did you get started, and what's the process that you use?
Well, I'm a convert to bear hunting. I had my reservations before last year, I will say.
Right.
I had a lot of the reservations that a lot of people have when you look at bear hunting, what they're doing, what they eat, they're big, cuddly creatures that people see on the side of the highway all the time, right? But when it really comes down to it, they're no different than the deer you see there. When I look at them, I'm looking at 2 pieces of meat. And what can I do with those 2 pieces of meat? I'm not worried about where it came from at that point. I'm looking at what dish can I make from
right.
Basically.
What's it going to be transformed into?
That's right. So I'm a bit of a convert. Up until last year, I never hunted bears, and a couple of my friends from down south in Calgary said, "Hey, you have a cabin in an area that we used to hunt bears. Let's bait some bears." I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll go along."
Right.
And I ended up taking the only bear in that trip. So immediately the wheels started turning in my head. What am I going to do with this? I've heard of bear ham, and I've had bear ham, and I thought it was phenomenal. So I immediately knew that's what I wanted to do with most of it.
We make bear hams too. It's been a favorite. I couldn't imagine a spring where I don't get out bear hunting. If I lived in the States, I'd probably turkey hunt in all the neighboring provinces, states, and places. But there's not a lot to do in the spring. Snow geese, bears, and if you get drawn for turkey, it'd probably take you 12 to 14 years here in Alberta. It's a great outing as well. But we were lucky when the pandemic started here in Alberta. The Alberta government declared hunting and fishing essential services. And that was basically back when we were all still locked down. So I was anxious to get out bear hunting this spring, and I was very lucky. I took a beautiful cinnamon phase bear the first time I went out, and we did some hams up and some smoked shanks, and I think I made 3 different types of bear sausage as well. And then I got out again and shot that second bear, and I still had lots to process, and that's when I phoned you and said, "Hey, Josh, would you like some extra bear meat?" And you were quite anxious to take it.
Absolutely, yeah. I was very appreciative to get that meat. I didn't get out this spring for bears. I put a lot of focus on snow geese this year,
right.
And just it didn't really work out with COVID and things like that. So we're focusing on next year. I took 2 bears last year, so I was very fortunate that way.
Right.
But yeah, to get that extra meat in the freezer was absolutely amazing.
We are lucky, though, because we have a very long spring season, but we also have an incredible fall season. A lot of the zones open as early as September 1st, and fall black bears are they're in prime shape for the year. They have the most fat on them. They've been eating, blueberries and Saskatoons and clover, and that's their primary diet late in the summer. So they're very fat. They're no different than a beef you'd finish off in a feedlot, except they have the forest as their feedlot. So anyone that has been thinking about going out and hasn't tried it, this fall would be a great time to step out. And of course, if you want to do more in the spring, next spring, there's lots of ways to do it, whether you want to do spot and stalk or baiting or different things. There's different ways to hunt bears. But, my big focus today is talking about how to eat them and what to do with them, because it's a lost art. Our pioneer spirit that helped create the settled areas of Alberta, bears were a big part of that, and slowly that's faded out. And like most people, they converted over to moose, and in more recent years, elk and even deer are kind of a phenomenon in most of Alberta. White-tailed deer weren't really prevalent here until the 1950s. So there was mule deer; they were more abundant, but popularity of different species kind of comes in ebbs and flows. So it's time to start a flow for some of the bear and give them some of the respect that they deserve. What do you do with the rest of the bear meat? You don't just turn it all into sausage and hams. I know you do much more than that.
The back straps, well, they're typically getting turned into some sort of schnitzel or some sort of, cutlet like that. There's nothing, in my mind, bear schnitzel, backstrap schnitzel with, mushroom gravy and some mashed potatoes is absolutely phenomenal meal.
It sounds good.
Yeah. And everybody seems to like it. So.
Right. There's a ton of recipes on Harvest Your Own. I'm sure you've been to the site and visited it. They have a whole section there on nutrition of wild game and a bunch of recipes. And it's actually pretty easy to find.
This podcast was made possible by Alberta Conservation Association and the Harvest Your Own community. If you're interested in harvesting your own food, there's a comprehensive collection of information to gain insight and knowledge. Head to the field, harvest your own protein, prepare it, and taste the results. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a library of information from getting started and geared up to processing, butchering, and cooking wild game to make the connection between health and food.
Well, that's important around our house. I mean, that's all we eat is wild game, and that connection is really important. I have to ask the question, even though I know the answer. What's your daughter's favorite meal?
She loves bear. She absolutely loves bear.
Right. She was pretty excited this year when you brought that home, and I don't remember the exact comment you made, but when you were making bear, she said something about it's, a special night, dream food.
Yeah, no, she just, that's all she says when you mention bear meat. Yeah, she absolutely loves it.
So a lot of people have a stigma about bears because just like pork for many years, there's a warning that you could end up with trichinosis, which is a parasite. And, the domestic pork industry also had trichinosis until recent years. It's only been a couple decades since they've cleaned that up. It can occur in bears, but it's not overly common. But the recommendation is to cook it well done, and it's always safe. So that's a challenge. Like, we're always talking about cooking wild game and don't overcook it. So all of a sudden we shoot bears and we got to change our philosophy in terms of how we're going to cook them, prepare them, present them, and all the rest of it. How do you cook game well done and still make it really palatable?
Cook it on high heat and fast.
High heat and fast.
Yeah. And that's the challenge. Absolutely is a challenge. It's no different than the challenge of making a well-done steak.
Right.
My mom likes well-done steak, and she's going to hate to hear this, but I always call it cardboard, But I've figured out ways of cooking it. You can do it. And the beauty of bear meat, though, it doesn't dry out as easy as deer meat or moose meat and things like that. So that does have quite a bit of fat in it. Of course, that varies per bear, but typically what I've seen is it doesn't dry out as much, so that's kind of nice. Right,
and there are different techniques for using it, but people that are concerned about that, what I do is I recommend that they use a crock pot. Some liquid, low, slow heat, bring it fully up to temperature, cook it well done, and that low, slow process, whether you're doing it in a crock pot or in the oven by braising, breaks down the meat, keeps it moist, keeps it tender. So there's lots of opportunities to do that. One of our family favorites is corned bear meat. So I put it in a brine and normally leave it in there for a week or 8-9 days, depending on how big the piece of meat is. And of course, you might not know this when you buy corned beef at Safeway, but corned meat is finished by boiling it. So you put it in a pot of water with some onions, carrots, and celery and boil it for a fairly long period of time. And, that meat has that nice pinkish red color from the curing salts and the spices. And when you boil it for a long time, it's well done, but it slices up. Of course, corned meat meals, you think of St. Paddy's Day, but corned meat and cabbage and some potatoes or stew, but you can also slice it and use it for sandwich meats, snacks, and all kinds of things. So you just have to get creative in terms of where you want to take it, but those are a couple ideas. On Harvest Your Own, I have a recipe for bear that's called rendang, and it's an Indonesian recipe that has coconut milk and turmeric and different cumins and fresh ginger and garlic and lemongrass. And you actually cook it down for 5 hours in liquid and just keep adding water and let it cook down. And it is so flavorful and so tender. It is another great recipe to use for things like black bear, or if you happen to harvest an old bull moose or something that's a little tough, you can certainly break it down and make it work. Tough question for you. I know it's tough because you love to cook and you're very creative, but what is your favorite wild game recipe?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask this question, so I did my homework. But, I probably would have had a different answer up until Friday. I took out a bear ham, and I do bear ham mac and cheese. Right?
Oh, wow.
Kids love it.
Yep.
You can throw some green beans in, and each part of that meal, each part of that dish is going to have some sort of it's going to be infused with some sort of bear or something or another. So right. I'll use the fat, or I'll slice off some ham and make little bits. So they're kind of like bacon bits, and you'll put it on top of the mac and cheese and
nice.
Stuff like that. So you make the roux with bear fat, things like that. So you try to incorporate as much as you can into it. But I think it's my favorite meal now.
Well, that's truly creativity, and that's what makes it nice. And you don't look at it just as wild game. You actually have your creative edge for each species. You have your goose tenders, and you use your bear lard for all kinds of things like making roux or mac and cheese, but you also do a lot of baking. You bake a lot of breads, and you incorporate wild game into that as well.
Yeah, I kept a sourdough starter going for a little over a year, I think, and then it kind of went in the garbage. But I do enjoy it. It's not something I do a lot, but right. When I do, I enjoy it. Pretty much anything in the kitchen I like doing. So,
where do you come by that? Was your mom a big wild game cook, or you just said she liked to cook everything well done? So
my mom was the cook. Yeah. Yep. And from a very early age, I guess I just showed an interest. But when we were younger, my mom always stayed home. And then when we got a little bit older, she started going back to work and things like that. And I would take and cook a dish for evening dinner and things like that.
Right.
So I kind of started there. I can't, for the life of me, tell you why it kept going that way, but it's kind of my release. If I get stressed at work, I go home and I cook, and it just fixes everything.
It's funny you say that, because I've said that to my family for years. Is I make dinner most of the time at home, and my wife comes home from work and dinner's ready, and people say, "Why do you do that every day?" And that's exactly what it is. It's a release from all the reality that you dealt with for the rest of the day, and it just feels good, and feels good to sit down and have dinner with your family every night around the table and get back to the basics of family life and enjoying things like that. What are your plans for this fall, Josh?
Oh, I have way too many plans for this fall. Way too many plans. But it's gonna start with like I said, the little pointer pup that I got, Zoe. She's a 1-year-old Brock Francais out of Ontario. And, she's just a little spitfire of a dog, and I've been doing lots of training and stuff with her. So it's going to start with upland game.
Nice.
Day one is probably going to be upland game. Might be a little bit of waterfowl. I'm not sure yet, but I'm very excited about getting her in the field.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to getting out with you. We'll have to actually plan our days carefully so that we can take some wild game treats and do some tailgating out in the wild, which is probably the original tailgate meal. Hunters, I'm sure. I've been to some places that actually bring portable tables and linens out and make it quite a formal affair, but sitting on the tailgate with a jet boil stove or something like that to prepare lunch is always a treat, or at the back of the goose blinds at the end of the day. So I just wanted to thank you for coming in today and sharing your information. Hopefully we've inspired a few people to go out and try hunting black bears and forage forward in terms of eating black bears. And until later in the winter, I'd like to possibly bring you back with your rabbit hunting buddy, and you can explain to the listeners, why you go out. Back in Newfoundland, I know rabbits are huge among sportsmen, and here it's a lost art, or people just have never embraced it. Their families never did. So let's share some information and encourage people to go out where they can really extend their season, because it doesn't close. It's open year round. Although I know you personally set limits on when you go and what you do, but we can share some information on rabbits, how to hunt them, where to find them, what to use for guns and ammunition. And of course, that's where you use your old dog, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's happy to get out. His days are numbered, I like to say, but he's got a few good years left yet. So. Yeah,
and I know he still falls asleep counting rabbits, so hey, life doesn't get much better. Thanks for coming in today, Josh, and for sharing your knowledge with us.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. And you know what? If we get one new bear hunter out of this, that makes every bit worth it. So
absolutely, I agree with you wholeheartedly. We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.